Hello and welcome, friends. Hi, Laura.
Hello.
So great to see you.
Yeah.
Welcome to all of our fabulous supporters of our grassroots podcast, Oh for Dying Out Loud. I am one of your infamous hosts, Angie Cat, the magical life midwife. And joining me, as always, is my beloved friend, Laura Shaw, the divine death doula.
That's me.
So that's you. I know
That's
it
me.
is.
Yeah,
It's
everybody.
only you. So today, I
Mhm.
thought we would talk about, well, actually, it was your idea because I was like, there's so many things about death and dying and that whole process in
Mhm.
between. Um, and so you suggested talking about, making those clear decisions, which I thought was timely and it's relevant to me
Okay, good.
because uh, I've had numerous conversations with my own parents about next steps.
Yeah. Yeah.
When is it going to be time for us to move out of the house? Are we moving out of the house? Are we going into assisted living? Are we getting our own apartment? Are we getting home health care? I mean, just looking, like I'm watching them go through
Mhm.
this decision making. There's so many factors to consider. And I know what's driving this because, well, one is because they're getting older, but also because we all watched in somewhat horror my grandparents who
Right.
really had a very difficult time making that decision,
Mhm.
wanted to stay in their home as long as possible. I get it. They were in that home for over 50 years.
Wow.
I mean, much 75 years maybe.
Wow.
I mean, it was built in the 50s, and they're actually getting ready. They've cleaned it out and they've getting ready to put it on the auction this week. And I can't even talk about that right now. That's a whole
Oh, yeah, that's
podcast
hard.
with some Kleenex.
Mhm.
So, but we watched them because they really just did not want to. They didn't want to spend the money. They didn't want to go to another place. They loved their home, had a lot of memories, and unfortunately, we all believe that they stayed in the home too long,
Right.
and it got to a point where, you know, my grandmother needed major medical care. And I think had we been able to get her into a place much sooner, she may have lived a little bit longer and with better care. But that, we don't know that. I mean, hindsight's 2020. But it's just interesting to watch that whole decision making process and all the things. Like I think we think sometimes, oh, I know exactly what I do, right? Like for
Yeah.
years my parents were like, oh, we're not doing that, we know where we're going to assisted living, it'll be great. And then you get into it and they're like, I don't know, maybe not, maybe we'll just stay in our home for as long as possible. So I'll stop talking now, but let's maybe just unpack that a little bit from the death doula perspective.
Sure.
What kind of insights can you share with us, or things to consider?
Yeah. So, like you, I have had conversations with many people, my own family included, about like my grandmother, who I have said before, I had the privilege of being able to take care of her at my mom's house. She moved in with my mom for a few years. And she had dementia. So I will say that in hindsight, my mom looks back and thinks I should have moved her to assisted living sooner, because
Mm-hmm.
then, like you said, she would have gotten acclimated while she was still in her own
Faculty.
mindfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
she could have made friends, she could have connected, and it would have felt more like home to her. Instead, we had kind of waited until um she was no like she would wake up at night and have she had been a sleepwalker as a child, and she became a sleepwalker as an adult, but also she had vivid dreams where she would be fighting.
Oh
So,
boy.
she'd wake up in the middle of the night and she'd have a brawl in her bedroom and break things, and so, but right.
I I don't mean to laugh about
No,
that, but
it's
now I'm
funny.
like, I was a sleepwalker, have been known to do it now, and I'm like, oh, God help the people that are taking care of me because this is my future.
Yeah.
So,
And so
yeah,
that was the impetus. And it didn't, she was mad at my mom at that point for,
sure.
and then my mom felt guilty to some degree. She knows in her core that it was the right decision. She
Right.
didn't live a whole lot longer after that. Um, but it's so I don't remember the statistic, but I should look it up. It's incredibly high. So
Mhm.
I think we all have this beautiful idea that I'm going to grow old and then one day I'm going to go to sleep and I'm not going to wake up and it'll be la,
Right.
la, it'll be beautiful. But the truth is that most people have a catastrophic medical event at whatever
Mhm.
age, anywhere from
Yeah.
50 to 75 or older,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
it doesn't kill you.
Right.
Instead, it disables you. And
Right.
when that happens,
Mhm.
what is your plan? So, then families rushing in trying to decide what you can afford, because that's a huge factor. Um,
Totally.
right. And then also, who's going to take care of, I have an uncle who doesn't really have, or I have an aunt who doesn't have any children left. And
Mhm.
she just has her three brothers. God help her. She's got my dad and his two brothers.
Ah, right.
And I don't know what will happen if, God forbid, anything happened to her, if she got sick or if she fell or needed care. She lives out of town. She doesn't live, like, one brother lives kind of far away. The other two live here in town. I don't know who would take care of her.
Right.
And so it's things like that, I think, that there are things that we don't count on. Like, when people think death doula, it's natural to assume I absolutely want to make sure what your funeral looks like, what your afterlife body care plan is. There's a lot of things, but more importantly, what does the transitioning period look like?
Right.
Like, what does that
Right.
look like? Do you want to go to a nursing home? Do you not want to? Do you have someone, a friend or church family or like
Yeah.
neighbor that you want to, do you have a golden girl like I do who will
Right.
take
Yeah.
care of me? Yeah, so it's such an important thing. And I think many of us don't, like, husbands and wives don't even talk to each other about this. And then, like you said with your grandmother, she became, this happens often in married couples. One person is ill and the
Mhm.
other person becomes caretaker, and sometimes they're not able to be caretaker.
Oh my goodness, no. Like he had his own health
Yeah.
conditions
Yes.
and he's in his late 80s. Like
Mhm.
that's, I mean it's a hard discussion. I get it,
Yes.
because we don't I think and partly that generation, and maybe you would agree with me on this, is and I'm curious to know what the theme is, but
Mhm.
they're very resistant
Yes.
to going to assisted living or nursing care. Like my grandmother especially was just no way, that because to her that was just one step closer, one foot in the
Right.
grave,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And I get that. And there's also the home and the memories and everything. But the challenge is that even though it was, my grandfather and my grandmother, who my grandfather was, too old to be taking care of her as
Mhm.
well. But now we've got the sandwich generation, right? We've got those of us who are working parents
Yes.
who have kids that we're taking care of. And now we've got our elderly parents that we're taking care of.
Right.
And this is why we have such a high rate of burnout. And, people are just losing it over this because they're not equipped.
Right.
I mean, so what I'm just curious, what is the prevailing theme that you might hear of why do people not want to leave their homes and go into assisted living?
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, there are many beautiful assisted living, nursing homes, or even like older complexes in
Right.
communities. You
Mhm.
can find them everywhere.
Oh yeah,
But
senior housing, like
right,
senior
yeah,
housing
yeah, which
communities.
is kind of a step in the right direction.
Right.
But for many people in older generations, they grew up, they worked hard, they purchased a home,
Mhm.
they, and they also grew up at a time when families took care of each other. Now, they also, at the time, often one parent stayed home.
Sure.
So you could help take care of grandma or mother-in-law or grandparents
Right.
who moved back in. It was
Right.
a little more functional. It worked a little bit better than it does now. And we just, I think we just get used to what we get used to. Suddenly you feel maybe, or what I've heard expressed is you feel like you've lost your independence. It's like when someone tells you you can't drive and you're
Right.
at the mercy of
Right.
someone giving you rides.
Right.
Uh, it's a really, you fought for your independence for so long, and then suddenly no one's telling me I gotta follow
Right.
rules and I can't do
Right.
this or this.
Right.
And oftentimes in today's world,
Mhm.
we also push up against parents who don't live near their children. Children move uh,
Right.
further and further afield, not always, but oftentimes. So
Mhm.
I think you've said before, your parents don't, none of the children live super close to your parents.
Right.
So if there is care to be done, it's not feasible that
Right.
somebody could just
Right.
hop right back in and I'll
Yeah.
stop in and see mom every day before. My
Right.
grandmother had moved from her home
Mhm.
to an apartment in Marion, and my daughter went to school near there. So every day my daughter would go there after school
Oh.
to be with her great grandmother, and I would pick her
Right.
up. It was like a 15-20 minute window that she would be there, but it was just kind of a check-in. So
Right? And that's
um, right.
beautiful.
It
Yeah.
was wonderful. She lived by the library. We'd go to the library, we'd go to dinner sometimes. And it was really just this
Mhm.
lovely thing. But that doesn't work for a lot of people
Right.
anymore.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it is a couple of things. And I think people are concerned
Mhm.
about giving up their own independence because you're right,
Right.
it is, you know,
Right.
I've done it by myself for 60 years, and suddenly
Right.
I am at the mercy of someone else cooking or someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can be a real challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
My
real.
parent, yeah, my parents were telling me that I don't I don't remember who they heard this from. Like it must have been somebody at the assisted living place that they were looking at said that, well, we looked into it a little bit more and like you can't have a toaster in your apartment. You get your little oven, you might get a little microwave oven, but you can't even have a toaster. And they won't let you have your own Tylenol bottle. And they were like, forget
Mhm.
that.
Right.
And I can see both ends to that. Like it's like, wow, that is kind of restrictive, right? Because now not only are they telling you, you're living in this apartment, you're giving up the independence of your home, but now they're telling you what you can and can't have in your home. But I get it from the standpoint of you've got people who are aging,
Yes.
and I don't know about you, but there's times where I forget stuff, like a lot of stuff. And
Right.
I'm hopefully not close to that age yet. But, you know, God forbid somebody in the apartment complex leaves the toast in the toaster,
Mhm.
or something else falls in the toaster and it's on, or they, mistakenly in the middle of the night sleepwalking, take too much
Yeah.
Tylenol, so there, I get it from that standpoint. And then on the other side, if you're living there, it's like this is stuff that I've been able to do for my whole life, and it's
Yes.
something simple. Why can't I? So I can begin to see where that can become a very challenging decision to make.
Yeah. They're just
Yeah.
butting heads with that whole
Right.
yeah, it is. It's an independent, and you can go in stages. Sometimes you can find a really great kind of level system where you go to
Mhm.
literal independent living, where you're in a complex, but it is seniors only. And then
Right.
as you graduate, or you have some health declines, then you can move over to the assisted living piece.
Right.
And then as that declines, maybe a memory care unit, maybe not. Um,
Right.
but the problem is it's really hard. I have a family member who lives with one of her aging relatives, and that relative is experiencing some I don't know if it's Alzheimer's or dementia, and they're going through this where that relative has to be tricked into having this person help take care of them, and
Right.
also is always like, okay, I was helping you, but now you've got to go, there's
Right.
so at what point does the facility know when someone is capable of taking their medication?
Right.
My sister and I hope my dad doesn't watch this. My sister and I have always
I know
said,
every time I
un-
say something about my family, I'm like, I don't know.
uh,
Go.
sorry, Dad. My sister and I have always said, under no circumstances are we taking Dad's keys away from him.
Oh, really?
Oh my
Interesting.
gosh, no. I am not going to be the one. If someone has to tell my dad that he doesn't get to drive, it's not me. So no goes,
You're
D. It's on you. So he's not there. He's a fine driver. He's doing great.
right.
Um,
Right.
but someday that might happen, and we have jokingly told my mom, like, we're not. My mom's like, well, I'm not taking him away. Like, I
Yeah.
guess
I'm
he's
not
not.
stepping in that boxing ring.
Right. So we have like talked about this jokingly, but the truth is, at some point, you
Yeah.
know,
You have to
this
have
is
that
going to happen
commitment.
to all of us, and
Right.
we can
Right.
either prepare for it now and have a
Mhm.
plan so that no matter what happens to our mind, uh,
Right.
our family doesn't have to feel guilty, even if we say mean things to them because we're not in our correct or our
Mhm.
true headspace.
Right.
So we have it all planned. Yes, when I start doing these sorts of things, that is, yes, put like you're allowed, and just be really clear about it. But also, there's the money aspect of it.
I know.
So
Well, yeah, and you bring up a good point because that was the next thing I was going to ask is, well, two things. One is, is it, I'm assuming that you can never talk about it too early, right?
yes,
Like,
agreed.
do it now where you can, when they're still driving, when they're still making their decisions, still active in their lives, and go, let's talk about that moment when it's becoming apparent, and
Right.
how can we handle this and prepare you and us for this inevitable conversation, because I think that to me seems like that might be part of the challenges, is that it feels abrupt because we've
Yes.
never addressed it ahead of time. We've never talked about it. It's just sort of that day shows up and you go, I think I'm going to take away your keys.
Right.
So that can feel like a shocker. But if we're talking about it well ahead of that game,
Mhm.
we can kind of emotionally prepare ourselves, because that's what it is. It's
Yes.
not the logistics piece of it. It's
No.
the emotional preparing ourselves for both the person who has to take the keys away
Right.
and the person who's having to give up their or surrender their keys, right?
Mhm.
So we
Yes.
have that conversation. But then the other conversation, which you're leading to, is it is about the money. Like, my parents have been talking to me at length about, here's what we're finding, and we're trying to figure out how do we stretch our dollar, that here's what we saw with your grandfather in the assisted living, and here's how much it cost, and oh my god, and can we
Right.
afford to have somebody in our home, and how safe is that, so there's all kinds of options to
Yes.
look at, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know what the average cost. I can tell you that recently I have run across a middle road, not heavy care, but definitely a care center where it's independent living-ish. You have
Okay.
a microwave, I think you have a mini fridge, you have your um kind of private living space and bathroom.
Mhm.
There's a shared kitchen that you can use anytime you want.
Oh,
And but they also include, all meals are included, but you could, for special days, cookies or whatever. And I think that was about $3,800 a month.
yeah.
Um, and it was kind of middle of the road cost. So
Which in my mind, I'm sitting there going,
right. Mhm.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, and I get it because I mean, you've got a lot more that's included, right? You've
Yes.
got your meals
Yeah.
included.
So I like to explain this to people though. So let's say mom was a stay at home parent,
Mhm.
which is not uncommon in the generation that is currently on
Right,
Social Security. So you've got a parent, one parent who was on Social Security, the other parent earned the average Social Security for someone who either had a pretty low paying job or um, was a stay-at-home parent is often right around $1,000 a month. That's all your money. That's what you're getting. So that's not your supplemental insurance. That's not the price of it. That's not your out of pockets. That's not, and that money,
mhm,
assuming that you hopefully have some other savings or retirement, which isn't true for a lot of people,
right,
um, then that money has to stretch into how, who's going to help grandma pay for her care. But it also isn't a lot to consider having an in-home health worker, which is also not inexpensive, which it shouldn't be. Definitely, they're skilled care workers and they
right,
do
of
a lot of
course.
great things. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so it's not an inexpensive sort of endeavor. So, I mean, it has to be a logistics sort of conversation to have with people earlier than
Mm,
later.
right.
Um, and also, please, 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 I beg of people two things. Number one, as an adult, do not tell your children or your loved ones that you will never forgive them if they put you in a home. Don't do that
Oh, thank
because
you.
I know far too many people who do that. Because they're not, look, I'm not saying I'm excited to be in a home, although I'd rather be in a home than making my children do some of the awful things and they don't owe me their
Right,
servitude for the rest of their life. So
right,
there's that
right.
piece. And as a child, do not let a parent, family
Mhm,
member guilt you into taking care of them because that's not helpful either. So
right. And it's so
navigate them.
interesting
Yeah.
because it's such a, I mean, I get that, and yes, 100,000%. Because here's the thing that I think we forget that, and this came to a major realization for me at 53 this past year. I live alone. I'm in a condo complex, right? And I have a locked building. It is keyed entry only. And I got the stomach flu so bad that I thought I was going to pass out. And I thought to myself, what happens? What happens if I'm by myself and I become so ill and incapacitated that I can't even reach for my phone to call
Yes.
for help?
Mhm.
And so it's those kinds of sobering things that for me personally, I go, oh, I'd rather be in a care facility where I know that someone's going to check on me
Right.
on a regular basis,
Mhm.
and or there's some button or something somewhere that I can call somebody. Because yes, for the most part, maybe 90% of the time, you are not in a situation where you need somebody.
Mhm.
But when you do, holy cow, is that going to be very, very helpful and beneficial,
Yeah. Yes.
and and I get it, you pay for that level of care, and so to sit there and have someone say, don't ever put me in a home. I get that. However, if that's going to be your philosophy and you really don't want to go into a home, then please, please, please talk to your children and your family about alternatives.
Right. And what that looks like,
Because,
how it's going to
right,
be paid for.
right, because we wouldn't do that with children.
No.
Like, the child doesn't go, don't ever put me in childcare. No, the family talks about how are we going to care for this beloved member of our family who
Mhm.
cannot care for themselves 100%.
Right.
So it makes sense that we're going to have this real conversation. So,
Yeah.
be open and honest about what are the options.
Yes. Yes. Well, and it's also a really tough conversation if it is not mapped out, then you will often find that this is one of those points in life where children have decided they hate each other because
Mm,
you may have one relative who's like, no, we're not wasting her money
Right,
and putting her in a nursing home,
right,
because then we're just paying them, and it's like, so like that's her money, let her pay. But some
right,
people don't feel that way. No,
right,
no, like we can,
right,
whatever. Or some people
right,
are really like, she needs to be in a home, and the other one's like, no, she doesn't need to,
right, right,
and there's hard feelings and things get ugly. So having the conversations open early, written down in a real way, and everybody has to hear it, so that
right,
whether the kids like it or not, it is not up to, or family members, because it's not always children. Um, it is, it's imperative that you make the decision for yourself. And
right.
I understand wanting to stay in your, like, I have a neighbor now, and my neighbor, bless their heart, we have watched them slowly deteriorate, and the time it take, like they used, up until this year, they were still mowing their lawn this year, at the beginning of the year, and it was, painful and scary to watch them, and we were terrified for them. Often we worry about this particular neighbor, we check in on them as well.
Yeah,
But I offered to mow the lawn, and finally they paid someone to come. They have someone who comes and mows the lawn now, and they've started getting someone who, Meals on Wheels, who comes in and checks on them. And then they have a family member now who's coming in to check on them occasionally, just to make sure they're okay. And that's real. Like it's
right,
just,
right,
um I understand wanting to stay at home. I understand,
totally.
as we age, wanting to be in our own independent space. And then sometimes,
Right,
we just
right,
have to let that go. And it's hard, letting go of your independence as we age. There's definitely things like, I hate that I don't understand technology as well as my children do sometimes. And I have to hand them my phone and say, no, I can't make this happen. You do it. And
I don't get the internet.
right. I'll mock me openly. It's fine. And
Right,
so that's a little piece of that. But anytime you have surgery or something and you're just completely at the mercy of someone else and you feel like you're a burden or inconvenient, um, it really
right,
kind of gives you a glimpse into what that looks like. But it is such an important conversation.
mhm,
And for people who don't have children, or maybe are the last person left in their family, this is truly important. I have definitely, in the last couple of years, on my journey, have run into people who will be in the hospital for a health concern, and they will not have anyone to be released to. They will not be able to pay their rent because they are incapacitated at the hospital and no one has power of attorney, or um, they can't, it's just, it puts you kind of in a really messy place. So even if it means you have to have a trusted friend or a neighbor, or a church or a faith community, or um somebody in this world, uh
mhm,
home health care, a social worker, something, to
yeah,
start laying out what your plans are.
mhm,
Because if we don't do that, ultimately
mhm,
those decisions may be out of our control, and you may end up somewhere at the mercy of some other agency that has to get involved and start making decisions for you. Which is it, that's not what anyone's looking for either.
right. So, I mean, I think we've driven home the point, at
Yes.
least I'm hoping we have,
Yes.
that have the conversation early and often
Mhm.
with everybody involved. And it's not about making a decision today, but
Right.
start talking about, what are you thinking? What, what is your, current financial situation like? I mean, should we start looking? Because here's the other thing I discovered. There's often a wait list at these
Yes.
assisted living places. So, by the time you may or may not be ready, there may not be a place for you. right?
Right.
At the place you want to be.
Mhm.
So having, laying it out and having repeated conversations about where do we want to go? What are our options? What's plan A, B, C, D? What who is in our tribe of support, our
Mhm.
circle of support, who will check on us, who can we ask to come and stay with us, or like I appreciate the fact that my parents are now leaning towards, well, we're thinking we're going to stay in our home as long as possible. And I told them, I said, I'm really worried about the stairs because they have a split level home.
Oh, sure.
And she said, actually, our doctors told us, don't install a chairlift. Don't do it. The more you keep walking, it's the same principle. Use it or lose it,
Mhm.
So walk those stairs as often, Now, if I could just get my mother to slow down so she doesn't blow a shoe doing 90 up those stairs or something.
Mhm.
Uh, but so, we're having those conversations because we're living longer, but we're
Right.
not necessarily, those years aren't necessarily of quality years. And
Right.
so we have a long runway with which all of these decision points are on the way. It's not just we wake up one day and go, this is the day we're going to make that big decision. It's a long thought out process, and thinking about who's going to be involved. Well, who's going to be the first contact person in the family, which child, and how are we going to divide and conquer. So we all know that. So can you share with us, maybe from your perspective, what are some things to consider with the different options? Like, you know, here's what you need to know about assisted living, or here's what you need to know about home health care. Are there any tips that you could
Yeah.
give us that would help in that decision making?
Yes. So the number one thing is safety. So it's always I'm always challenging people to come at it from a space of safety. If
Mhm.
if I have a relative who still lives on their own and I go into their home, I want to know that it is free of clutter, it is safe for them, they are able to meet all of their needs. If that means that appliances are changed out, they're no longer gas, they're electric, or maybe they're like there are just a handful of things that to keep someone in place or wherever they are is it's
Mhm.
always safety first. So
Right.
home healthcare is an amazing option. It can start slow. You can start with just having someone come in once a week to clean, or to have your pharmacy. They can help package medications so that I take medications, and multiple medications. And so I know exactly how I set them up for myself so that I know if I've taken them or not. And as I get older, I'm sure that will get more challenging for me.
Sure.
So how you can get pharmacies to prepackage them in your daily
Hmm.
pieces so that
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
yeah.
Or
Um,
you know what? I had bought a bottle of vitamin B12 at the
mhm.
store, and I had several expletives just trying to get that bottle open. So,
Yes,
I
they can
mean,
help
and
you.
I'm a fairly strong person, so it's like it's good to know that there are you can go to your
There's
pharmacy and go,
options.
with these little pill
Just
counter for me.
yes, little packages you can tear open. Um, and so like you can do something like that. You can have a meal service. There's thousands of them. So there's things like Meals on Wheels, but there's also like I can think of four just in the immediate community that popped to the top of my head that will help seniors. Some it's based on income, some it's not. It's just about
Mhm.
your age. That can come in and bring you prepared meals for the whole week. So every day someone will stop in and bring you a meal, and then on Fridays they bring you two extras so you have something to heat up.
Absolutely.
Which is really helpful, especially if you're not someone who is comfortable with a oven anymore. So great,
Right.
microwavable food,
Yeah.
great. Um, so those are really important things. And
Mhm.
then as you start to see a decline, or even maybe before, like start considering things like, do you have a grab bar in your shower? get
Mhm.
one installed. Do you have any stairs that a ramp could be installed easily?
Mhm.
So I broke my leg last year, and to get to my front door, I know, ridiculous. To get to my front door, there are 3 steps to get up to my deck. And
Yeah,
so if I had had to have a wheelchair instead of crutches, would I have been able
yeah,
to get in my house? The answer is probably no at this point.
right, right.
So start thinking about how you could. There are often places in the community that will come and help you build a ramp. Usually there's like an aging services. Most counties have checklists or contact sheets that you can reach, like go look and see, oh, aging, here's where you go. This is
What is that? Is that the Department of Aging Services that
Yeah,
most counties have, or what
yeah,
is that?
yeah. So there is a Department of Aging Services, but also most communities have their own, whether it's through AARP or
Oh,
some other agency in your county.
okay,
Um, Most communities, smaller communities are probably better at this than larger communities. We're just working on ours here. Have a community center, which often has activities for seniors.
right.
Even though I know that some people don't like being called a senior, I'm sorry. Persons who are of retirement age, I'm gonna call it.
Right, right.
Yeah, so there, but grab bars, having things low, don't put things on high shelves, that's always dangerous. So I mean, there's things like that. And then as they progress, knowing
Mhm.
that you can get a lot of insurances will pay for at least some home care. And if you are a veteran, check with your VA to see what kind of benefits you might be entitled to beyond what Medicare or Medicaid would cover.
Really? My
Mhm.
dad's a veteran and he's never mentioned anything like that. I wonder
Oh
if he knows
yeah, yep, he
that.
should definitely check in. There are always changing rules about, there's TRICARE, if you were a vet.
Right.
I don't know if that's, you had to be active duty or not, but there's some things that you qualify active duty,
Mm, right.
in wartime. Sometimes there's other programs if it wasn't wartime. So yeah, absolutely, always check with your VA, always.
So
Uh,
good,
um,
good point.
yes, it's important. And then if you feel like maybe you're thinking about or considering your next steps, so really there's a lot of communities for people with no children at 52 or 62 and older. I'm sorry, 62 and older. There's a lot of communities like that where it's 62 and older. Come live here. It's a condo
Right.
or it's townhomes or it's just an area that is really focused on senior living, where
Yeah.
there's not there. Maybe they have someone who comes and mows the lawns or does some of the outside work, but for the
Mhm.
most part, you're still independently living. You're just living in a
Mhm.
smaller space. Um,
Yeah.
and then as maybe your care needs progress, maybe you do need someone to come help you shower, or maybe you do need someone to come help you um, do your medications. That's kind of when you get into assisted living. So assisted living
Mhm.
is really more, um, you cannot take medications. They have a med cart, and the med cart comes around and to make sure that you're taking all your medications on
Mhm.
time. If you are a diabetic, they
Mhm.
often will come through multiple times a day and test your blood sugars. Although with
Mhm.
CGMs, I hope that's something that they're not poking your finger all night anymore. Um,
Right.
if you retain water, if you have heart issues, they'll often weigh you multiple times a day to report back to the doctor. Mm. And then those sorts of places will also have you come um, eat dinner together. So you
Mhm.
can choose not to. You might have a small kitchenette in your space,
Mhm.
but you're always welcome to go down to dinner. And if you need assistance getting down to dinner, they will actually send someone around, pick up trash, help you get to
Mhm.
dinner. They have shuttles that will take you to the grocery store.
Mhm.
things like that.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
so that's kind of more, and assisted care often will have a small area that is also designated for memory care, which is more a lockdown facility to make sure that you don't wander off. That happens a lot with people. If you're
Alzheimer's and
Yeah,
dementia.
if you are
Mhm.
gonna stay at home and take care of a loved one, or if you have parents who are still at home together and you have seen that one of them is starting to slip and they're refusing to leave their home, they do make a lot of things that are helpful now. So, smartwatches, number 1. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, smartwatches. A lot of smartwatches now have a fall protection feature where it doesn't protect you from the fall, but if it has a sudden fall, it will alert whoever you choose
Mhm.
to be your
Yep.
person. And
Right.
also those same watches often have what I like to lovingly refer to as a low jack, so that they can find you. Back in the
Oh.
way, way back times, they'd low jack a car, which just
Oh.
means that you could find it. I'm that old. So,
Funny. Yeah.
so you can do things like that for your loved
Yeah.
one in case they wander. Alarms that you can get, that if they leave the house with their bracelet on, an alarm goes off so that you know. So
Right.
you could,
There's even more, I mean, I think there's even more technologies that are coming out, because
yes.
I actually, so I have an Apple Watch, and
Mhm.
I was telling my dad, yep, it has fall detection on there, so it will call you or Laura if I take a really bad fall, and in some instances it might even call EMS, right?
Right.
And he's like, oh, because we looked at the Safe Light or
Yes.
whatever, and
Yep.
it's like, oh my God, it was so expensive, and maybe I should look into a watch. The sad thing is I love my father so, so much, but he is um frustrated easily by technology, let's
Yes.
say. And so am I, right? Like the apple did not fall far from that tree. So I'm sitting there thinking, I don't think you'll handle it, because there's so many other things going on,
Oh,
and
yes.
need to know how to navigate that. But there are others, because I looked it up, and there are some others that are just really much simpler,
Yes.
where
Yep.
it's like a little cell phone, or it's some sort of a watch band that it is literally only for, tap a button and somebody will come, kind of a
Right.
thing. So there are,
Mhm.
I know that there are some options that are starting to become more popular out there. So
Yes,
yeah.
and less expensive,
Yes.
which is
Yes, for
so
sure.
important because
Yeah.
oftentimes at that age, you're living on a
On a
budget.
budget.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So, look, I think aging at home is amazing. I love that idea. I love the idea that multiple generations can live in the same structure. I
Mhm.
just know that that's not super realistic in the way that we all live now. Like I
Right.
was able to help care for my grandmother because my grandmother had not she wasn't like wealthy over the moon, but she had enough and my parents could absorb her, her living with them enough that she could pay me a small stipend of money from her.
Right.
So essentially I was her home health worker, and and
Mhm.
and that was lovely. And so
Right.
I've heard of people who find um care workers. Maybe you don't need someone as detailed as a home health care nurse. Maybe you need a companion. There are places,
Mhm.
To the Rescue, I
True.
think, has some, and
Yes.
some other,
Yes.
yeah. So and some other places like that. I've heard of people who meet people through church. This is what communities used to do. The
Mhm.
wives or the spouses would often, so and so has a
Mhm.
sick member, and so the
Mhm.
ladies or the husbands, they'd go help tend to the husbands would go mow the lawns, and that
Right.
the women can
Right.
mow the lawns too. I mow lawns, but
Right. Right.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
no disparaging here. But
Right.
so like it's just we've kind of gotten away from that as we've grown big, larger
Right.
cities, different communities where we don't necessarily even know our neighbors. Excuse
Right.
me. And so we're just trying to get back to that so that, to
Yeah.
some degree, maybe your parents are great and doing fine, and maybe you get to know their neighbor and you say, hey, if you don't see them in a
Yeah,
24-hour period, will you just, here's my number, will you call me? That's what our
right,
neighbor, our next door neighbor, that
right,
his, one of his good friends stopped by
right.
after the derecho, talked to us, gave us his contact information and said, he doesn't really have any family who lives here in town. So if you see
Mhm.
anything going on, call me. And we,
That's great.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he checks
And
in on them. So yeah.
yeah. And I agree with you. I mean, I think that this is, this is what Europe is doing. I mean,
Yeah.
there's lots of programs where they will pair like, younger college age
Mhm.
students with, an elder person who is still very high functioning, but wants to have a companion. And there's been some beautiful friendships that have grown out of that, or there's the communities. The one thing I will say though that I just want to throw out there is something to consider, because I watched it in my own family, is that yes, if you have the ability and everybody's on board, yes, we want mom or dad or whatever to stay with us, and
Right.
we'll take care of you or watch over you. Be clear about your boundaries and stay in your lane,
Yes.
because if it's getting to a point where you're taking care of increasingly complex medical issues that really needs to be addressed by a healthcare worker who's licensed,
Yes.
that is vitally important,
Yes.
because you're putting both of you at risk.
Mhm.
If you're, well, how hard can it be? Well,
Right.
it can
Oh,
be
it's
very
hard. Don't
hard,
do it.
right? It's really hard. So just be mindful of that kind of thing, that there are other resources to help you in those situations, managing those care. Because I think one of the other reasons why we have gotten away from the community aspect of it is because we live in bigger and bigger houses, number one. And
Mhm.
number two, we have shifted the lion's share of the challenges of aging have become more complex medically,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? Like it used to be acute situations. And now that we're living longer because our healthcare system is able to keep us alive longer, well,
Mhm.
now that what that means is that, yes, we live longer, but we've lived a longer period of time with a chronic condition.
Right. That
So
needs
your
clear medical
diabetes,
attention.
right? That, now we're getting to the point where, yes, you can live a long time with diabetes, but you may end up having to be on dialysis, or
Yes.
you've got congestive heart failure. So you constantly have to, have the water drained off, or whatever it might be. So Alzheimer's, dementia, all
Oh,
of these
yes.
things require a little bit higher level of care. So
Yep.
that's something to consider,
Right. And don't
is
be
that
afraid to draw that boundary that you
right?
literally cannot do this. Like I am I have a really clear contract when working as a doula. And I would encourage people that you address this like a business when
Hmm.
talking with family members. Here's what I am willing to do. And once it
Yeah.
gets out of this space,
Hmm.
I am not your girl anymore. Like someone else is
Right.
gonna, like we're gonna have to
Totally.
follow to the next step.
Right.
Because
Right.
you're right. Because like I am not interested in
Yeah.
taking doing medical change out of medical equipment. I mean, I have a diabetic kid and I don't even like um putting her insulin in her. I don't like changing her sites. I know how to do it. I've done it before. She's an adult now. It's fine. I got her through. But
Yeah.
like that it I hated doing it and I am not a
Yeah.
medical person. I'm not trained for that. So yes,
Yeah.
if it is a medical need for sure.
Yeah.
Um
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, I would just share this story. Uh, but I'm gonna, because I love to share these stories simply because I think if it can help one person
right.
understand the brevity of this, I mean, my grandmother was a diabetic, and she was an out of control diabetic for many years, and was adamant that she wanted to stay at home. And so they had eventually they finally had a home healthcare nurse that would come in, maybe twice a week, but they, it got a little sketchy, it was like, we don't know if we like her, whatever, what are we paying for, etc. Well, she ended up having a diabetic sore on her foot
Mm,
that would not heal. And so they finally convinced her and said, look, this is a major situation. We've got to get it in and checked out. And she ended up having to be put into nursing care. But shortly thereafter, they had to amputate part of her foot because of
yeah.
this diabetic sore that had not healed. Had they caught it early enough, I mean, it wasn't like they didn't know it was there. It was just that they didn't get the care that they needed in their home, and they were not in a nursing care facility. So she had the part of her foot amputated from that, which is sadly somewhat common with diabetes,
It is.
and unfortunately, she ended up getting an infection because of that. And that's what took her life eventually. So the point is that she was only in nursing care for a month. She could have absolutely, had we been able to have that conversation and helped her to understand the multiple benefits of being in assisted living, she may have been able to live a lot longer. We don't know that,
Right.
but those are the kinds of things that I just, when I've lived through them, it's like, oh no, we were not going to play this game where it's like, well, you're going to stay in your home as long as possible, then we're just going to bandage it up like we know what we're doing you know
No.
there's a clear point where you do need to have additional assistance with nursing care, and it's but there, like you said, there's a plethora of resources, and I would imagine this would be a plug for you, but death doulas are there to help you navigate not
Yes.
only what are your options, what are the community organizations and resources you can pull from, but also how to navigate that conversation.
Yes, how to navigate. And I think as I get older and as I watch the people around me get older, I think it's important that we take some responsibility as people who are aging to be open to that conversation and to understand that sometimes it isn't about, I've definitely seen it in families where one person is like, no, she doesn't ever want to go there, and the other one is like, I don't care. And at some point it's just like when you divorce and have children together. It isn't about you, and it's not about what the kid wants always. It's about what's best for them.
Right.
And my mom made a really, really good point recently when talking about my grandmother's care, and that is that idea that she wishes she would have gotten her there earlier so that it would have felt like her home. She would have met and made more friends before, since we took her there so late. Um, just
Yeah.
that maybe it would have been easier for her
Right.
had she
Right.
been more willing, which is always hard. Angie, what about you?
Yeah.
Are you into going to a nursing home?
Oh,
Assisted
yes.
care? Yeah,
Well,
I am.
but I think I'm in a different situation though, because um I'm currently single. I was late to be married. I'm divorced, and I'm single, and my first home is a condo, and would I love to have a house? Sure, it would be lovely, but there's a lot of maintenance to it. And so for me personally, I like the idea of having ready-made community,
Mhm.
ready-made neighbors. I like the idea of knowing that I'm not an island and that, somebody will check in on me.
Right.
I absolutely like the idea of, particularly if I've got a chronic condition, I
Mhm.
want some additional help because thankfully, I'm relatively healthy. But, during COVID, when I got COVID or when I got the stomach flu, I know I have had a little small taste of what it feels like to be completely isolated when sick. And it is scary. That's
Yeah.
my personal opinion. I want to know, that there's someone that will check on me regularly, that has access to be able to check on me and make sure that I'm okay, so and I also, because I've watched my grandparents navigate that whole situation and how challenging it was, which is
Mhm.
why I think my parents are very much, they've been talking about this for 10 years already,
Right.
and they're still continuing to talk about it because they really want to be proactive because of that.
Yeah,
They don't want to be hit with surprises. They don't want it to be where, oh, we're just going to wake up one day and the shit has hit the fan and we've got to make a decision right away and we're not emotionally prepared for that. They're doing the work, God bless them,
right.
of starting to have those regular conversations to be prepared. They don't have it all figured out yet. They're still looking, but they're lining up their resources, lining up their options, and trying to determine what might be best, you know. um and it's hard. I mean, the economy is in such a way that, you know, there, that's a major consideration, which I feel is so sad, you know, that we are
Yeah,
in this situation where seniors have to decide, you know, between, I mean, and this is not new, we're preaching to the choir, you
right.
know, where they have to decide between housing and, you know, food or health care, you know, like that, those are real things. So if you know someone in your family, if you know someone who is a single elder, you know, it's time to bring some sacredness, I think, back into our communities from that aspect of how do we care for our elders who
Yes,
are transitioning out of this world.
right.
That in itself can be a sacred, sacred transition. And imagine how loved would you feel if you knew your community rallied around you,
Mhm.
right? Your tribe of people that check out. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things I love about living here in Iowa is that I get to see this on a regular basis. I have a lot of older friends, older, you know, chosen family, and I get to watch on a regular basis when someone's got an illness or something. People rally around. What do you need? Do you need food? Do you need support? Do you need to drive to the hospital or to the doctor? You
Right.
know, that makes it a loving community, and you know that no matter what happens, you're cared for. So I love that idea. So I'm just putting out the call that we need to bring that level of
Yeah.
sacred community back, because that, I think, is not only adding richness to while we're living, but it is creating a completely different feeling around the transition of death and dying
Yes. And aging,
and aging. You
right?
know, people are scared of aging, and I think the one of the biggest fears is, I don't think it's dying necessarily. I mean, I think it's suffering. There is
Yeah.
definitely fear of suffering, and I get that. But I almost wonder if a large reason why we don't want to talk about aging and or dying is because on a deep visceral level, it feels to us that we are becoming invisible.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, you know, nobody wants to talk about, you know, the old person and their challenges or whatever, and you know, who's checking in on them. And I mean, I can understand that. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be invisible, that nobody checks in on me, or, you know, wants to, you know, just have a conversation with me or make sure that I'm okay. I mean, I think that's part of it, is that we've lived this full life and we just don't want to fade away into oblivion where we're
right.
not remembered, we're not, you know, we just, we're swept under the rug. That's what a lot of seniors complain about,
Mhm.
right? Is we're just swept under the rug, so nobody has to pay attention to us. And we can change that. We can
We can.
change that for our current generation of elders, and we can change that for ourselves
Mhm.
by continuing to have these conversations.
Absolutely.
I love that. Well, that sort of feels like that should be the end of a conversation here.
Yeah,
So
it was lovely.
that just was a heartfelt channel right there. It's just like, ah, this is what it feels like. And, you know, we joke a lot about the Golden Girls. You
Mhm.
know, I think one of the reasons why that program was so popular is because it spoke to that community,
Yes.
and it spoke to this idea of we've got each other's backs as we get older.
Mhm.
you know, and, you know, there's a lot of people that are talking about, well, I'm just going to get my girlfriends and we're going to Golden Girls it, you know. That's a real movement I'm seeing happening, is particularly for those who never married or they're widowed
Right.
or, you know, whatever it might be. How can we create our own communities so that we can walk each other home?
I right? I will never regret this, as crazy as I am, and probably drive my, flatmate, Golden Girl Jen, a little
Yeah.
nutsy, sometimes, but, my first Christmas with no children in the house, and they were all, either with their kids or, off
Yeah.
with significant others, I didn't wake up alone. Like, it was like, no, me and Golden Girl over there, we both woke up with the cats, and went and saw my parents, and it was just
Yeah.
lovely. And so I haven't had
Yes.
to, like, I it is like that. Like, it's just that
Mhm.
community, and you're right. It's so lovely to have a community space where we just hold
Yeah.
that for each other. And it's lovely.
Yes.
So
Yeah, it is lovely. And I mean, I've woken up to a few Christmases or other holidays completely alone, and
yeah.
I know exactly what that feels like. And even just the ability to have someone, you know, reach out and go, "Hey, why don't you come over for dinner or whatever?" Again, community.
Mhm.
Community can make all of this transition for us as we continue to age a lot softer and more loving.
Yeah.
So keep talking about it, people.
Yeah.
It's over dying out loud. Talk about it loud and clear, you know, so that we can help our loved ones make the best decisions and give them a really lovely sending off
Yeah.
as we continue to age. So
Absolutely.
well, thank you so much for your wisdom and your information. It was so enlightening to learn a little bit more. And of course, we kind of, I'm sure, just scratched the surface. There's lots of
Yeah.
other things that we could
Mhm.
dive into, and we probably will. So, for our listeners, if you've got comments or questions, drop them below. We'd love to hear that. That might show up on another podcast. What you want to most know about this beautiful thing called life, death, dying, the transition in between. We're happy to talk about it. We're here for it. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much, my dear friend.
Mhm.
You are truly
Thank you.
divine. And we'll check in with you guys in a couple of weeks again with some more topics about all of this. And thank you. And in the meantime, enjoy your week. All right.